Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Dojo Live. Today is Tuesday, June 29th, 2021. We're almost halfway through the year. I'm Tulio Siragusa, broadcasting from Southern California, joined by my co host, Carlos Ponce, who is in Cuernavaca, Mexico. Hey, Carlos, welcome back.
Yeah, as ever, Tulio.
And today we're talking with Joshua Montgomery, who's the president and founder of Mycroft AI. And we're talking about privacy, open source, building trust in the face of big tech. But before we go into the topic of conversation today, let's get to know Joshua a little bit. Joshua, please take a few minutes and tell us about yourself. Introduce yourself.
Well, good morning. Thanks very much for having me on the show. I'm Joshua Montgomery. I'm the founder of Mycroft AI. Here at Mycroft, we're building an open and private alternative to Siri and Alexa. I got my start in the tech world building a technology actually called the Fox Blocker, which was a V-notch filter for cable TV that blocked Fox News for people. And from there went on to get a little bit more involved in building competitive systems for broadband access. So in 2005, 2006, I founded an internet service provider that does gigabit fiber to the home with a focus on providing connectivity to low-income families. And that company continues to provide service in Lawrence, Kansas, just right next door to Kansas City, to thousands and thousands of students and low-income families adjacent to the University of Kansas. And a few years ago, I started a new tech startup. Our concept was we had built a makerspace. So, things like over here, 3D printers and laser cutters and things of that nature. And we were building it as a place where entrepreneurs could come and, for $50 a month, they could get a desk. They would have access to some really high-end prototyping machines. And then because of the internet service provider, we had a data center where they could rack computers and, everything you really needed to start a business. And one of the things we wanted to do to stand out was to build Jarvis from Iron Man, right? You have Tony Stark talking to the ceiling and, with the 3D models and stuff coming out. And, we kind of had envisioned this talking AI that was a bridge between the real world and the digital world, right? With the idea that you could do things like ask it, where did I put that hammer, right? You got a desk covered in tools, and it would be able to take a picture of the desk and then shine a laser pointer where the hammer was on the desk. Things that really bridge the world of digital and real. And at the time, on the voice assistant side of things, the only thing that really existed was Siri, and it was attached to the iPhone, and it wasn't in any way extensible or open. And so, we developed what later on became a smart speaker. And a software stack to go with it that we could control and customize and change. And so, my career has led me to lead that company. And then simultaneous to that, I've spent the last decade in uniform with the United States Air Force, where I specialize in cyber warfare operations and more recently combat communications. So it's been a great 14 or 15 years, and I've been able to put my aerospace engineering degree to work in some places and been able to put that internet service provider experience to work in other places. And then basically by accident ended up stumbling into the fastest growing market in the history of technology. Smart speaker adoption globally is the fastest technology adoption ever. Smart speakers have been adopted faster than smartphones. And, we've just been kind of riding that wave and trying to build something that provides folks with an alternative to some of the offerings from the surveillance capital companies.
All right, cool. So, Mycroft AI, there's some relationship to smart speakers with that company, right? Tell us what the company's all about.
Yeah, so we wanted to build this voice assistant for our makerspace, and we realized that in order to do it, we needed an always listening microphone with a speaker. And excuse me, we did that before Alexa or Google Assistant were a thing. And so, we used to go out and try to explain to investors what we were building. Well, it's a speaker and it sits in the corner and it listens and you tell it to do stuff and it does stuff, but it can hear you even when it's playing music, and investors just kind of scratch their head. And they would come back to us and be like, that seems like kind of a niche market. That why would anybody want something like that in their home, right? Like, I don't even really understand what you're talking about. And then our friends at Amazon did a Super Bowl ad with Alec Baldwin in 2016, where they debuted the Amazon Echo. And then all of a sudden the conversations were, oh my God, this market is so big and everybody's going to want one of these. You can't possibly compete. Why would we want to work with you, right? And literally over the course of one weekend, it went from not understanding the product and it's a niche market to it is too huge of a market for you to even participate in. And so anyway, so Mycroft has been the beneficiary of it's sitting here listening to me. Mycroft has been the beneficiary of a lot of accelerator programs, and including Techstars and 500 Startups and Mass Challenge. We're venture backed. We've built a global community all over the world of folks who are either using or contributing or working for Mycroft, and we're very, very lucky to be where we are today. Building smart speakers for homes, building smart speakers for companies that are looking to deploy them in healthcare and hospitality settings. And then, of course, building all the underlying software that makes it possible for an always listening technology to do what you want it to do without spying on you the way that some of the products from surveillance capital companies do.
Okay, so eventually you got VCs to listen and see that the big market opportunity sometimes is validation that there's a need for more, right? Mm-hmm. All right, so let's go right into the topic because we want to learn more. You've hit on the privacy lever a few times, and I'd love to understand the differences. But Carlos, please, let's introduce the topic and dig right in.
Of course. Thank you, Tulio. And of course, thanks, Joshua. So, Tulio, there's a question in the air. The question is, how can the creation of an open source smart speaker engage the world? Right? So we're going to be answering that question right here on Dojo Live because we're going to be discussing the topic of building trust through privacy and open source in the face of big tech. So the first question that I have for our guest here today is, let's start with from the beginning. Why did you choose this particular topic and why did you feel it was relevant for today's day and age? Let's start with that. Thank you.
Sure. So privacy has become increasingly important over the last 4 or 5 years. When Google first debuted its search engine and Facebook first debuted their social network, people really didn't give a lot of thought to the privacy components of that. They were quite happy to be able to find the cat pictures that they were looking for through the search engine, and super happy to be able to keep up with their grandma and their cousin on Facebook. And so, they really kind of ignored the privacy component. And as I recall, Mark Zuckerberg famously said privacy is dead, right, in the early 2000s. And it's only recently in the last 4 or 5 years that people have started to really examine that assumption and think about it a little bit more. I talk to a lot of people who interact with these types of technology, and one of the stories you hear, it's really common to hear, is somebody who talks about having been in their kitchen either with their phone or with a smart speaker and having mentioned something, right? Like, I have an interest in going fishing this weekend with Uncle Bob, right? And then, an hour later, they're on their phone or they're on their computer, and all of a sudden, all of the ads in their Facebook feed or all of the ads in their search results are related to fishing equipment, right? And they scratch their head, kind of wondering, like, how did the information get from point A to point B? And there's a couple answers. One of them is, this is a surveillance device, right? It's got 2 microphones on it that listen to you 24 hours a day. It's got a network connection that you don't control, so you have no idea what this thing's doing out on the internet. And then it also has a bunch of software on it that you don't control, right? The operating system for a typical smartphone, you don't have control of that. You get whatever your carrier provided. And so this is one path that the surveillance capital companies use to surveil their customers. And I wouldn't actually consider you to be their customer. You're actually their product. Their customers are the people who buy advertising from them, right? So they surveil their products, which is you, the user, and provide that information to advertisers who are targeting you with information. The same is true of smart speakers, right? It's a smart speaker sitting in your kitchen. It's listening 24 hours a day to everything that's going on in the home. And, it's broadcasting that information and controlling that information in ways that we don't necessarily understand. And, for whatever reason, people with smartphones aren't quite as sensitive as they are with smart speakers. That black device or that white cube sitting in the corner of your kitchen really causes people to think about the privacy aspects of that always listening microphone in ways that smartphones really don't inspire, right? And so, there's a lot of people out there, and it actually turns out it's about 20% of the overall market, that like the idea of having a smart speaker so that they can tell it to play Bob Dylan and tell it to read them the traffic report or to set a timer when they put something in the oven, but really aren't excited about all of the information about everything that's going on in their kitchen being monitored by some big tech company that has ulterior motives and possibly a hidden agenda. And so, for us, the goal is to provide those people with an opportunity to have that technology available in a way that preserves their privacy, where we're not listening, where we're not collecting data, we're not selling that information. Like, the person who buys and uses that smart speaker is our customer, not some advertiser or some big corporation that's trying to get them to buy things, right? That's the customer that we're working to build technology for, and we've been very lucky to be the kind of the first player in that space, and to have this commitment to openness and privacy.
So Joshua, who is that customer that you're targeting specifically? Is it a business? It's like the solo entrepreneur, or is it a consumer? Who is the customer that's adopting this technology from you that's more privacy based?
Sure.
Who's taking an interest in it?
So when we look at the folks who are interested in what we're doing, one is just general consumers. We are very heavily focused on early adopters and developers because as an open source community, we count on our customers to help us to develop the underlying technology. And so, as we got started, our goal was to find those Linux contributors, those Python developers who were excited about this concept, and invite them to join our community so that we can improve the underlying technology. And with the Mark I device that we shipped in 2017, we were very successful with that. We ended up shipping to developers in 56 countries that spoke something like 35, 40 languages, and got contributions from all over the world.
I'm sorry to interrupt. When you say contribution and community,
yeah.
I just want to understand clearly what that means. So, for example, I know that in the earlier days, and even still now, if you asked Alexa something and it didn't know what to do, there was actually a report sent to developers that could develop a response to that question, right? They had all these things that didn't have any kind of programming on them, but they had a way to collect it and improve it. So that's not a community doing that. That's employees doing that, right? So you've got an army of people to keep up with possibly millions of different one-offs that were in program. How are you guys doing that? Is that, when you say community, is it the actual community of open source programmers that are actually going in when something's being requested and it doesn't know how to answer it or deal with it, that are going into programming that? How does that come together for you?
Sure. So you can look at the community as a continuum. At one end of the continuum is a hardcore Python developer who has mad experience developing software applications and wants to contribute core software related to machine learning and intent parsing, right? And at the other end of the continuum is grandma, right, who doesn't really know how any of this stuff works, but also wants to contribute to an open and private future. And so as a company, we've been working on tools that engage everyone within that continuum. So, the developer, we have this open source community, all of our underlying software that does wake word spotting and natural language understanding and speech synthesis is all open source. And we have a community of software developers that contribute patches and code changes to that software to improve it, right? Then we also have exactly what you're talking about, is community volunteers who help when a customer has explicitly opted to share their data. And in our case, We collect nothing from our customers unless they explicitly say, I want to share my data to improve the technology. If they don't say that, we maintain nothing. We don't track them. We don't know what they're using the technology for. We have zero visibility unless they actively opt in, right? For people who opt in, we can do exactly what you said, but instead of a small fighting force of paid employees, right? Like we have an army, right, of 60,000 plus developers and contributors who can reach in and help to solve some of those one-off queries that we might not have an answer for today. And the same with speech recognition. You know, when we get an audio sample that we don't know what to do with, you know, that army of volunteers can reach in and say, you know, this person was asking to set a timer for 15 minutes, right? And then at the far end of the contribution spectrum is, you know, grandma, right? And grandma can contribute by simply saying, I'm opting to share my data, right? And that's it. And then that data goes to help to improve the underlying technology. But, you know, much like millennials and dating, right? With us and data, it's all about consent, right? It's about affirmatively saying, you know, we are asking permission to use your data. We are asking permission and to improve the technology. You know, you have to actively opt in order to participate, which is really a differentiator between us and the surveillance technology companies. You know, you'd asked earlier about the customers. Yes, we have early adopters, and yes, we have grandmas on there. But the other place that we've seen a lot of demand is in enterprise organizations that either one, have a vertical that competes with big tech. And I would argue that if you're in business today, you probably compete with big tech. Those guys ship books and CDs, but they also make spaceships, right? And so it really doesn't matter what business you're in. Odds are at some point you're going to compete with Google, Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, or Apple, right? And then the other place is businesses that are sensitive to privacy. So healthcare is a great example where smart speakers make a ton of sense in a healthcare setting, either in an elder care facility where it can prompt people to take their medicine and get confirmation that they've taken their medicine, or help them play music, or help them, you know, with reminders, to a more hardcore healthcare environment like a COVID ward, where a smart speaker can prompt the patient to turn on their sides and to prone in order to improve the drainage in their lungs. Healthcare settings are very, very sensitive to privacy. And so having a smart speaker stack that is HIPAA compliant and preserves the hospital and the patient's information is critical. And then finally is hospitality. You know, you know, one of the female VCs that we met very early on in this process, and when we showed her the technology, her response to us was, you know, I know two things about this technology. One is it's going to be in every hotel room in the world within the next 10 years. And two, that prostitutes are never going to go by the name Alexa again. And so
that's a good one. That's a good one.
There's a desire to have privacy in a hospitality setting, because people get up to things in hotels that they don't necessarily want the rest of the world to understand. And there are millions and millions and millions of hotel rooms out there that could benefit from a concierge voice assistant like the one we built.
Joshua, I got a quick question. I mean, I can't stop thinking that when you said a few minutes ago that I always thought of me as a consumer, not as a product, right? So it was like, boom, now I'm a product, right? And I mean, I don't take it personally. I know where this is all coming from, but it feels weird to use those terms. So in that context, what would you say? Would you say that tech companies that are manufacturing and creating this technology are across the board globally are doing a good job on properly messaging their approach to privacy to consumers, or is this something that could be done better?
No, I think that they're misrepresenting it intentionally. You know, the reality is that you're the product. I mean, think about a product like Amazon Prime or Amazon Video, right? Not Prime as a shipping, but Amazon Video. Did you ever wonder why Amazon got into the streaming video and video production business, because it's really foreign to the rest of their. I mean, they're a retailer, and then they're a cloud computing company, and now all of a sudden they're making movies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is that your preferences in what you watch on TV are extremely revealing about your behavior as a customer.
Mm-hmm.
So Prime Video is not about entertaining you or selling Prime subscriptions. It's about paying attention to what you watch so that they can better market their retail products to you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's a way to get data about their customers, right? That same person who came up with what I would argue is a disingenuous and dishonest service, right? The goal not being to entertain you, but to basically figure out based on your behavior what you're going to buy in the future, wants to put an always listening microphone in your kitchen, and has done so in tens or hundreds of millions of households around the world. I mean, I think it's something that people should think about, and big tech doesn't want people thinking about it, because that's how
Mm-hmm.
you make money.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen companies like, for example, Facebook, Apple, and other big players in the space. Well, they do make it a more, let's call it a more prominent element of their consumer-facing privacy communication than other companies that do not do that in the same way as these players do. So, would you say it's something that shouldn't be overlooked in the near future?
Yeah, I think it's something that customers should be really thinking about. I think that Apple is a great example. Apple's done a fantastic job messaging their technologies as private, but when you look at their communications, they're very careful to say, we keep your information private from third parties, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't sell it to Bob and Alice, but they say nothing about how Apple itself is using that information to target you with goods and services, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because their products, whether it's the iPhone or the Apple TV service, or their computers or their streaming platforms, they allow that company to learn a lot about
Mm-hmm.
their customers, and then of course they use that to target those customers to sell them additional services. So
Right.
even the one of the five that really has made privacy something in their core messaging, at the end of the day, is monitoring their customers or their product in order to sell them more product.
Right. Even considering the fact that they almost all of them, they all express a strong commitment to encryption, for example, right? But do we, as consumers, well, as products, do we have to be concerned about this whole their approach to encryption? For example, whenever I see, I don't know, WhatsApp, and I see that there's a little text there that says that all messages are encrypted and all that, I wonder if what I'm seeing is really adjusting itself to the reality that I should expect. No, I don't know. I'm just guessing from my standpoint as a user. Okay, but.
And I think WhatsApp's a great example. They've recently changed their privacy terms, right? And forced anybody who is using WhatsApp to opt into it if they wanted to continue using the app. And the new terms, explicitly share information about your WhatsApp use with Facebook so that they can continue to define their profile of you as a product, so that they can sell you and your eyeballs and your attention and your profile of who you are to the highest bidder, so that that highest bidder can sell you licorice or whatever they happen to be selling today.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Are there some generational differences where some just don't really care that their privacy is open like that?
Yeah,
Have
I
you
think
noticed,
I
maybe
think so.
between certain groups that some people just don't care, and some do? And also in business, I would assume that's probably a bigger risk, like you said, in healthcare or even in fintech. I don't see an Alexa or a Google device being deployed in an office like that anytime soon, because there's confidential information, potentially insiders' information that shouldn't be out. So does this solve that problem? What you guys have created, does this solve that particular problem that makes it more palatable for a business user like that?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, even law firms have contacted us and said, we want to build a voice app that allows our attorneys to ask questions about case history within the law firm. These big firms that have like 3,000 lawyers.
Right.
who's been in front of this judge in the past, right? Can you connect me with them so I can have a chat with them, things of that nature. And of course, they're very, very sensitive to privacy. And so I think that there are definitely verticals within the business market that are very interested in what we're building. Target just yesterday, announced a project in partnership with the Linux Foundation to go ahead and help start building ethical frameworks for our technology, right, for voice assistants. And then I think you're right. There is some generational, there is some differences generationally in how people are sensitive to privacy. I think that in many ways, those of us who are in, I guess that you'd consider me to be Generation X, we came, all these services stood up as we were adults, and we started using them without giving a lot of thought to the privacy implications. But I think a lot of us are starting to rethink it. In my daughter's generation, I have an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old. I don't think they're giving any thought to privacy at all. They're getting out on TikTok and sending all these videos and doing all these things. And I've really been sold this what I would argue is a lie, that in order to use these convenient services, you must give up all your privacy. And the reality is that there are services out there that can preserve privacy. And, if Federal Trade Commission and regulators do their job, those services will continue to be available.
Yeah.
I think one of the challenges has been that anytime a competing service that's even remotely viable to a technology like, so let's say Facebook appears, Facebook buys it, right? Like WhatsApp's now owned by Facebook because WhatsApp threatened Facebook. And I think that we need to be given a lot more thought, both, as consumers, but then also as citizens, to how we want our regulatory regime set up to protect our privacy.
So Joshua, we're coming up on time. I think we have a few questions about the company itself.
Sure.
Did you want to take this, Carlos? I didn't mean to interrupt you if you wanted to jump in.
No, I was just going to, as Tulio says, Joshua, unfortunately, we're approaching the final segment of today's conversation. Before we go there, I wanted to ask you specifically about Mycroft, specifically about the company, because there might be viewers out there who could be watching the show and might have an interest in the company, might want to come work for you at some point. So in that context, what would you say the company is like in terms of culture? What is important for you when you build your teams? What do you look for in people, or who would you define as the right teammates for Mycroft?
Sure. So we're a purpose-driven company. When you look at a company like Apple, the core tenet of the company is think different. The secondary tenet is, we want to build beauty into all of our products. The third tenet is, we happen to build computers. Would you like to buy one? Right. Mm-hmm. And that's a quote from Simon Sinek on the power of why. Mm-hmm. In our case, the why of the company is, privacy and user agency. The idea that the technologies that you use represent you and not the company that sold it to you, right, are hugely important for us. We think that the voice market is going to be huge, and it has become huge, and that there's a big opportunity in that market. We happen to make a smart speaker come work for us, right? And so, people who believe in the core tenets of our purpose, are generally a good fit for the company. We were distributed long before COVID made everybody else distributed. So, we had developers as far east as Darwin, Australia, and as far west as Stockholm, including developers in Brazil and, developers from all different backgrounds. So, we're happy to have people join the team independent of geography. And then, we're always excited to work with people who care about openness. The idea that the work they do isn't locked in a closet somewhere, that is, the key is thrown away so that some company can benefit from it. The work that they do for us is open source, which means that as they move on in their careers, they can reference, look at this great library I built at Mycroft. You can download it and see all the fantastic code I wrote. That's important too.
Well, Joshua, it's been great speaking with you. We're up on time. I keep being reminded of that story, the story of David versus Goliath, right? And eventually David won. So Any words of wisdom you have for those who might have an idea that is in the face of big tech, is facing a huge marketplace with ginormous players? What words of wisdom would you have with them for if they're sitting on the fence?
Oftentimes the enemy of your enemy is your friend, right? And so, you look at a company like Amazon and you think, wow, how could I ever build a technology that competed with Amazon? But then you look around and say, you know what? Amazon threatens Walmart. Amazon threatens Target, right? Why don't I go and talk to those guys and see if we can build a coalition around, whatever the product is, to compete head to head with our friends at Amazon? And, I know that worked out pretty well for jet.com. And I think that there are other opportunities out there to build competing technologies that do preserve privacy. DuckDuckGo is a great example in the search space. It's built a great search engine that competes head to head with Google. You've got new web browsers, things like Brave, that compete with Chrome, and then you've got an increasing interest within the general population in using and building technologies that do provide great services in the face of big tech. So, if you're have that entrepreneurial spirit and you've got an idea and market validation, if you have market validation, always go and get market validation before you invest money and time. I think that it may make sense for you to go out and do it.
Well, it's been a pleasure to have you with us. Stay with us as we go off the air. What do we got coming up for the rest of the week, Carlos?
We got 2 more shows, Tulio. And tomorrow we'll be speaking with Prakash Hosali, the co-founder and CEO of Aquila.ai, which is also an artificial intelligence company. The topic is going to be behavioral artificial intelligence. So we're going to be answering the question, how can AI address the growing and unsustainable costs of healthcare, especially managing lifestyle-driven chronic diseases? That's one. So, and Thursday, which is our last show of the week, we're going to be speaking with Maju Kuruvilla, the Chief Product and Technology Officer at Bolt. And the topic will be the future of shopping, identity-powered commerce. We're going to be answering the question, can identity-powered commerce help retailers survive the cookie apocalypse? That's what we have for this week, right here on Dojo Live at 12 p.m. Pacific. And of course, we've got the recap show on Monday. Next Monday. No, wait a minute. We're not having a recap show.
It's a holiday.
Yeah. And also we're taking off, right, Tulia, for 2 weeks.
Yeah, so this Thursday will be the last show. Live show. And then we'll do a recap when we come back in 2 weeks. We'll recap
exactly.
10 shows. We'll see. Thanks for being with us. See you tomorrow at 12.
See you tomorrow.
Thanks, folks.